executive functioning difficulties, that difficulty with impulsivity and those really big emotions, those are your like two key ADHD markers. Big impulsivity, big emotions. I think it makes sense to say, well, of course we don't grow out of that. But at the time, that really was kind of the idea. So if ADHD is impacting your whole life,
Partner betrayal is disorienting, heartbreaking, and results in absolute confusion for the betrayed partner. You worry that nothing in your life was real, and you fear that you will never be able to trust your spouse or yourself again. Well, welcome to the Rebuilding Trust podcast with Carol the Coach. I'm Carol Jurgensen-Sheets, aka Carol the Coach, and what I can promise is that when you listen to my podcast, you'll begin to believe that there is hope. We will be hearing from experts all over the world who specialize in problematic sexual behavior, sex addiction, and infidelity. Together, we will be asking them the hard questions about how you both can rebuild safety, find strengths, grieve and mourn what you had, what you never had, and what you fear you will never find again. The truth is that rebuilding trust is possible, and I am going to show you the steps to working together to build a whole new marriage based on the honesty, authenticity, and transparency that your marriage deserves. Rebuilding Trust with Carol the Coach. Welcome to Rebuilding Trust podcast. And you know it's my mission to expose you to experts in the field that can be helpful if you are dealing with any kind of problematic sexual behavior or infidelity. And for our listening audience that are clinicians and coaches, I want to expose you to some of the newest research, some of the newest programs, and the professionals that may be in or out of our organizations. And so today, we don't know when this will drop, but it is a Sunday. And Dr. Lyne Piché has been so willing to do this for us that we are both working on Sundays so that we wouldn't feel stressed and wouldn't be able to cut it short because we have our clients to go to. So Dr. Lyne, thank you so much for coming on Rebuilding Trust to share your expertise.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. This is fantastic.
Yeah, I know that this is going to go viral because so many of our men and women that have problematic sexual behavior have been diagnosed with ADHD. And you really believe that ADHD can affect and impact sexuality across the board. Can you tell us, how did you get into this field and how did you begin to see this correlation?
Happy to. It's so interesting. You know, so many of these things start with COVID. So we have to start with the break that everybody got on. And so if I dial this back a little bit, I've been a psychologist and working in sexual health for 26 years now. So I've worked with a lot of people who have problematic sexual behaviors, who've gotten into trouble with their sexuality, people who've come in for affairs, people who are just coming in the regular practice because things aren't working so well in their relationship or in regards to sex. And throughout my career, there's always been this like thing where I've worked with people and I'm like, yeah, you know what? We're getting most of the way. I can see, you know, people are kind of getting it and understanding it and we're sorting things out. But you would get to about 80% with some people. And it always felt like there was this missing little piece. As a psychologist that works with adults, we don't typically hang out with the child psychology folks. And they're the ones usually that are talking about ADHD, that are working with kids who are disruptive in class. And there had been this, I think, divide really between some of the mental health practitioners that work with kids and adults. And we didn't always talk about, well, what happens after, right? When those kids are having a hard time at school, they're having a hard time with learning, or they're really impulsive, what happens as an adult? And I think there had also been this belief that somehow this kind of goes away. neurodevelopmental disorders, are shown to not go away for most people.
Mhm.
And so what happens is all of those behaviors keep going and it continues to be a problem in your life as an adult. Because we haven't really talked about that very much, we're only starting to get the research that's talking more specifically about how ADHD is impacting sexuality.
You know,
Yeah.
you just said that, and yet I worked in a pediatric clinic. The only one that was part of a big scholarly educational hospital. And I was taught in the late 80s, I was taught that you never lose your ADHD, or back then, ADD also, but you grow not out of it, but into some adaptive coping skills so that it is no longer holding you hijack. And, and yet in the world of problematic sexual behavior, uh, I'm all the time hearing from couples and hearing from men and women that say, I think I got ADHD. And can I get screened for that? And we all know that there are screening tools that any of us can use with them, but the testing tools have to come from a PhD or even an MD. So here you are, you too, I believe, were kind of taught that they would grow out of it, but you weren't seeing that, right?
No, exactly. And, executive functioning difficulties, that difficulty with impulsivity and those really big emotions, those are your like
Mm-hmm.
two key ADHD markers. Big impulsivity, big emotions. And when you think about it, I think it makes sense to say, well, of course we don't grow out of that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, that really was kind of the idea. So if ADHD is impacting your whole life, it's
Mm-hmm.
also going to impact your sex life. It just kind of makes sense. And, COVID was wonderful for that because so many people who are neurodivergent got online, started talking in chat rooms, started talking about their experiences. And I feel as mental health professionals, we were really able to get a lot of insight and information from people directly about what is life like here as an adult with ADHD? What are some of the ways that this is impacting you? And it's been a really fun ride for me in getting to know this and putting this together with a lot of my clinical experience as well. And what I did with all of that, because I wanted the information to get to people quickly,
Okay.
and to see how you could use it and not just say, well, let's do another study. Let's just, um, research this some more. I created a workbook so that people could start looking at, if you've got ADHD, how is this impacting your sex life? What are some of the ways that it might come up for you so that you can start understanding where the impulsivity is coming from, right? And making it less about like a personal failure and more about, so my brain gets stuck on stuff. And
Mhm.
if my brain gets stuck on stuff and it happens to have gotten stuck on sex, I can help my brain do that a little differently. And a lot of the strategies I'm sure that you teach, Carol, and that come up in these groups as you're working together as a community can then start making a bit more sense.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And so you've got this workbook, and does it help the person with their executive functioning in their prefrontal cortex? Or does it help develop skills that can put a pause on some of the impulsivity? Um, because our population have kind of trained their brain through the use of pornography and web chats and affair partners to always be looking for that next thing so they can't stay present. And that oftentimes looks like ADHD.
And you're right. There's a lot of ways in which ADHD can present, and sometimes it's not ADHD. So if
Mhm.
we think about sleep problems, for example, sleep disorders, sleep
Mhm.
apnea looks a lot like ADHD. If you're not breathing at night, that will give you very similar issues with impulsivity. And so it is really important to have like that full physical, make sure that everything in your physical world is going well. And if you've done all of that and you're like, no, I'm breathing at night and my body is okay and I have what I need and my blood works great, then we start looking at where else is that impulsivity coming from. Some of the ways to put the brakes on when you're taught, okay, manage your impulsivity and do it this way. If you have ADHD, those strategies might be really hard to do. And if you failed, you can feel like I'm a failure rather than I'm trying to do something that's extremely hard for my brain. And that, I think, is the shift in understanding that I'm hoping people will take out of our conversation today. When we're managing ADHD, we want to manage skills plus pills. So you want to be looking at how am I managing my ADHD, right? Am I going to the ADHD support groups? Am I working with a physician? Am I doing what I need to do to manage the ADHD? And then what we see is that people do much better applying cognitive skills to managing their impulsivity because the slowing down part, the break part, is more online. And then it becomes easier to do some of the things that you want to do to have that happy, healthy life.
So since I have the expert here, and for my listening audience, I'm talking to Dr. Lyne Piché, who has made it her passion to help people with ADHD, and especially around sexuality. But right now we're talking in general. With having you here, I grew up with ADD and ADHD as two diagnoses that occurred frequently in the world of children. And then ADD went away. And it was all ADHD. Will you share with our listening audience, how did that evolve?
Absolutely. So in the mental health world, we have this book that tells us the name of mental health disorders, the DSM. And so in that book now, we have moved from ADD to ADHD, so the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And interestingly, a lot of people in the ADHD world think that that's really not a great name. And it's not a great name because it leaves you with the impression that the only issue is your attention. And of course, that's not true. If you have ADHD, you can have that hyper focus on something. And if it's something you like, you're going to have a lot of attention. But if it's something your brain doesn't find rewarding, if it's something your brain doesn't like doing the dishes or taking the garbage out, maybe doing that report at work, you're not going to have very much attention or focus at all, right? So it's very variable. There's three ways that this can present. The first way is ADHD hyperactive, which would be more what you're, I think, used to thinking about. I always think about the 7-year-old boy that can't sit still in class, right? Those were the kids that got identified initially. Then there is the inattentive, which is somebody who is much more daydreaming. There's more things going on in your head. You're not so present. There's more this sensation of zoning out and really getting lost in kind of internal fantasy land. And the research coming out specific to ADHD and sex is still emerging, and the samples are fairly small, but they're getting bigger.
Good.
And one of the trends that we're seeing is that it's the people with the inattentive. So if you're sitting and watching a lot of TV, a ton of doom scrolling, lots of just getting lost in fantasy. Maybe you're super creative and you've got stories and videos going on in your own head all the time. That would be a good example of somebody who has an attentive ADHD, and that may be more the issue in regards to sex. So it's not necessarily maybe who we first think about is the person who's out there and moving and doing things, because of course, if you're super busy, and this is just my thought about it, but if you're super busy and you've got a million projects on the go, there's not that much time to get overly involved in sex. And then we have a combined presentation with people who meet both criteria. And they also seem to come up, at least in one or two studies, as being maybe also being the folks that are going to have problems with sex. So depending on how you present, it's going to look different. It's very individual, and it's why we say, you need to start with a good assessment and make sure that this does fit you. But if you're really struggling with sex and that hyperactivity the hypersexuality, the too much porn use, the too much sex, we have a lot of studies now that are saying, look, there's this link between ADHD and hypersexuality. It's there. And so you're more likely to be somebody who may have ADHD. And if you have ADHD, you're maybe more likely to be somebody who develops the hypersexuality.
Got it. Yeah, I remember early on being told that both ADD and ADHD had something to do with minimal brain dysfunction. And that was the clinical diagnosis. And I was taught that the brain did not react the way it was supposed to. And so we gave kids with ADHD stimulants to slow down their brain because it didn't react the way it was supposed to. Now, are there medicines for adults that need a little extra psychopharmacology, if you will, to help control that impulsiveness, that inattentiveness, that kind of thing?
It's so interesting to see how the field has evolved over the years because, yes, there are differences in brain structures, right? Slight differences between people who have ADHD and autism and people who are neurotypical. And there also seems to be some difference in regards to the nervous system, in regards to sensory issues. Now, I think the $1 million question there is the goal is to create a healthy, happy, neurodivergent lifestyle versus a neurotypical lifestyle. So I'm going to come back to your question, but I want to clarify this piece of, when you're looking at how do you want to live well with ADHD, part of it is accepting the ADHD and going, well, what does a neurodivergent lifestyle look like? What's the best job for me? What's the best leisure activity for me if I have ADHD? And that's probably going to be different or might be different from what you might be doing if you're neurotypical. And that's super cool. No problems with that at all. So when we're looking at medication and some of the ways to address ADHD, it's not about erasing it or about making people like quote unquote function like everybody else. It really is about helping the frontal lobe have, I point here, right? So kind of helping the front of your brain have better brakes. And if you can have better brakes for the impulsivity, then you can make choices that you're going to make that are going to be great for you, and you still get to make that choice. But we're just slowing things down a little bit. And we know that there are medications that are incredibly effective and useful for people who have ADHD. And I think the great thing about that is that there is something that you can do to make this a little easier in your life. But it's both things, right? And I would say 3 things. So you're looking at like a medication protocol, you're looking at learning the skills, and those things are important. And the third thing I would add is this importance of creating a lifestyle that actually fits who you are and how your brain likes to function.
So give us an example of that.
Absolutely. So we talk a lot about, it was right there and it went away. Okay, that's a great example. If you have ADHD and you're like, I have a thought. Oh no, it's gone. Right? Having work that aligns with that aligns with creativity, that aligns with being okay with saying, oh, you know what? I forgot that. Give me a moment. I'm going to come back to you. Sometimes people like to have lifestyles that are very, very minimal. Like I think of the mini homes and the cabins. You have less stuff. And so it's a little easier to keep track of stuff. Sometimes other people are like, no, I love all the things. Like right now, I'm right into whatever. I'm going to build a chimney in my house because I think that's the coolest thing ever. Or I'm going to build an outdoor sauna, or I'm going to do a thing. And then that's like the exciting hyper focus. And we need those things to keep our brains interested and engaged. But once that project is done, maybe you're like, meh, I've really moved on and now I want to learn how to kayak. And so having places, particularly in relationships where you can have those discussions that are like, well, my hyper focus has moved to kayak. So we're going to sell the outdoor sauna so that, everybody's happy financially. And then I can use this to do this other thing. There's ways that you can make this super friendly to yourself and to your family without always being in these battles about how things are supposed to be.
Are you looking for hope, healing, and real connection on the journey through sex addiction or betrayal trauma? Lit Path is inviting you to join us June 25th to 27th in Nashville for the CSBD Hope for Healing Conference, the nation's leading event focused on awareness, recovery, and reducing stigma. This conference is for individuals in recovery, partners and couples seeking healing, and clinicians or coaches looking for advanced training and continuing education credit. Hear from leading experts, experience powerful sessions, and connect with a community that truly understands.
Hi there, this is Tim Stein.
I'm Dr. Jake Porter.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Vitale.
Visit csbdhopeforhealing.org. That's csbdhopeforhealing.org. Use code PODHOPE25 for an exclusive 25% discount. Break the silence. Reduce the stigma. Find hope and healing. We'll see you there.
So then if I pull it back into sexuality, because obviously, again, my population has trained the brain to always go for the pursuit. What else is out there? And that looks like ADHD. And sometimes it is ADHD, but it's also problematic sexual behavior. Your workbook probably gives some assignments to help somebody who's in the midst of having sex stay in the present and notice what's going on right there in the room where you're having sex. Is that right?
Absolutely. So 2 things that people tend to do when they start getting into trouble with sex. And I love this idea of the chasing. The first thing is people, if you have a hard time staying present, and interoceptive awareness is that sensory ability to stay present. Do you remember a moment ago I was saying how there's these slight differences in the nervous system too? One of those is sometimes the wiring between the brain and your body is a little weak, which means it's really hard to notice the body and it's hard to notice how the body is feeling. And so people will start dealing with that by upping their intensity. So they start going, if I do things that are more and more sexually intense, it will be easier for me to stay in my body. If I use a shortcut like porn or alcohol or drugs, it'll be easier for me to stay in my body. But the initial issue has to do with this wiring and this difficulty of actually knowing how am I feeling and how do I kind of find that within myself. So definitely one of the first things you want to do is get to know your sensory system. What things help you get grounded into your body, what don't. Often for many people, it's actually active grounding. So contracting your muscles, doing those runs, those sprints, heavy exercise will maybe make you feel like you're kind of in your body a bit more. And so when you have that online and you're no longer chasing intensity to fix this problem,
Right.
you start making better choices. One of my examples that I like to use for this is if you're always driving to work and you're taking the same freeway and you're going, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. After a while, you're going to stop paying attention to your driving. And if you have ADHD, maybe you're going to start getting really distracted. And what we don't want is accidents. Yeah. So if when you're driving to work, one day you take the bus and the next day, maybe you drive an e-bike or you take the country roads or the back roads and other days you take the freeway, we're creating variation. And that variation can really help mimic the intensity. And I don't know if this is making sense to people, but it's kind of like, yeah, I see you, Carol.
Yeah, well, I was
You have
sitting
a
there
thought?
thinking,
Yeah.
yeah, well, it mimics intensity, but it also mimics staying in the present because you aren't going to go unconscious and fantasize about this over here. So I like that it does something simultaneously.
Absolutely. And so that's kind of the fun thing about variation. And so often when I'm teaching, I always like to talk to people about this difference between intensity and variation. And often when I think about people that I've worked with who've had similar problems, it's almost like the intensity becomes the way to deal with this issue. And because we don't talk about ADHD and sex very much, it's normal that you don't have the language to describe this. Right. So you go see a healthcare professional and you're like, oh, I'm having these problems and I don't know. We don't have the words. The other thing that we see specific to sexuality in people with ADHD is a need for novelty. And so that also can become where we might have this issue with this interaction of needing things to be new and exciting and rewarding, right? ADHD means that you have a reward-based brain. Your brain likes things that are super fun and exciting, and it doesn't like things that aren't. And after a while, there's this habituation. We get used to things and your brain gets used to things. And so it's not as exciting anymore. So how can you bring in some novelty to make it fun, make it exciting, to, play games with a partner and change things up and really enjoy what I call play. So when I'm talking about sex, and I should have started there today, every time I say the word sex, I mean play. We are playing with a partner. Right? And when you play, you really feel like doing something. You feel like doing it again. It doesn't always have to be the same way. You're having a good time. And both people at the end of it are like, hey, that was really fun. I enjoyed playing with you. This is where we're going with this. So if sex is play and you're having a good time and you can bring some novelty into it, that's also really important.
And so one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, we're talking problematic sexual behavior, but specific to affairs. How do you see how ADHD and affairs merge or relate?
Oh, they absolutely do. And I'm going to answer that question and I want to come back to something. So that I'm just saying that for my own head.
Okay.
Because it's important, I think, when we look at these things. So what does the research tell us? The research will tell us that if you have ADHD, you're more likely to be divorced. If you have ADHD, you're more likely to have affairs. Relationship chores. So all the things that have to do with maintaining a relationship. And that's those text messages, the kind of business part of relationships, right? You're communicating, you're talking, you're doing all these things, you're picking up milk, you're doing the things that are related to having relationships. And that can be really difficult for the ADHD brain that is often looking for novelty. So that's the first thing when we think about affairs. The relationship chores are harder. And so sometimes there's this distance that gets created. The other thing is object permanence. So here's my pen. It's not a great pen, but let's use something that's a little prettier. There you go. I'm using a nice pen here. Now, you've got your pen. You can see the pen. You know that the pen's here. Now the pen's gone. Do you remember that the pen exists? So many people who are neurodivergent have a hard time remembering that the pen exists if it's gone. Specific to what we know in the literature is as soon as we have ADHD, we add alcohol, we add drugs, we get this like heightening of the impulsivity, and then people start doing things that they wouldn't otherwise do because of that impulsivity. And I think if we add this difficulty with the object permanence, maybe I'm on a business trip, maybe I'm away from home, maybe this person's not around, and we also add the need for novelty, you can start seeing how these things and these factors can play in to create the tornado that would get you to an affair, you know? So when I talk about affairs and I teach about affairs, I always have like a bit of a staircase model. You know, you kind of work your way from one space to another. And we often can see that neurodivergence as the kind of ground floor of the rest of the issues that pile up and get you into that place where you're making that impulsive decision that really harms yourself and it harms other people.
You know, we have, through our association and through the great Dr. Patrick Carnes, who's the father of sex addiction, he has a fire drill, which is that same stairway, but instead of it progressing to acting out and that novelty and that thrill seeking, it is a fire drill that takes you to the next place you need to go to back it down. And I love that you started talking about the staircase, because you can do both. You can watch it escalate, or you can watch a recovery program. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the best ways to do that, if you have ADHD, is to manage the ADHD, right? So it starts with managing the ADHD, getting diagnosed, getting on the right meds, learning the ADHD skills, figuring out what a neurodivergent lifestyle looks like for you and in your partnership and your life, you know, and then from there, the rest of this stuff is so much easier to come down. I mean, use your fire drill to come down, right? To kind of get yourself into a better space. But if the ADHD is kind of running amok in the background, it's really tough.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to just talk quickly about is, you know, we don't know why there's this relationship between ADHD and hypersexuality and problematic porn use. We see it, it's there. I think some of the things make a lot of sense. One of the possibilities also is that people are using orgasm and sex as a way to manage the ADHD. So, you know, colloquially, if you're on social media at all, you might have heard of this thing called post-nut clarity, which really means the clarity that comes from after orgasm. You can kind of get your work done and you can think a little clearer. And so if you're having problems with sexual impulsivity and you're using sex to deal with the ADHD, again, it might not be something that you even notice, because maybe you started doing that really young. You're like, hey, I've got this problem and I can't focus, and maybe I'm in college and I'm trying to sort myself out and it's not working and I can't study. And you figured out that, you know, if you masturbated, watched a bit of porn, then you could get your work done and hand in your assignment. And this kind of progresses through people's lifetime. And so I wanted to mention it to your listeners because I find that it does come up fairly regularly, where again, if you manage the ADHD and you get that under control and you learn about it, all of a sudden that need kind of goes away, right? Because you're not needing it to focus anymore. Yeah, go for it.
Absolutely. As well as, obviously, there's two ways to ejaculate and get that clarity. And one is to masturbate, and the other is to find a lot of sexual partners or to have frequent sex with that sexual partner. And you're saying that there's certainly research that suggests that somebody with ADHD will get some relief right after orgasm, and they'll have some clarity. They'll be able to get things done. But you can also get relief from many of your exercises in your workbook, right? And I just want to remind our listening audience, the workbook is called ADHD and Sex, a workbook for exploring sexuality and increasing intimacy. There it is. Let's see it up front, and published by Routledge.
Yeah.
That's a big R. Yeah. And they can go to www.adhdsex.com for more information about the workbook.
Yes, absolutely. So the information is there about the workbook. I have courses for the general public. I also have courses for clinicians if you want to learn more. And I want to just be specific here. This idea of coping with ADHD using the sex, we don't actually have research that says that's a thing. It's one of the question marks that are out there because of this link and trying to see how it relates. And people are saying, oh yeah, I know what this post-nut clarity is. I do that all the time. But being able as clinicians to say, hey, is this a thing for you? Hey, this is a thing for other people. We're only starting to develop the language. And, as I was listening to you talk, Carol, I realized that for many partners, maybe you don't have ADHD and your partner does. When your partner is using sex to make themselves feel better or to deal with ADHD symptoms or whatever is going on there, it feels really crappy, right? So the partner is not going to feel so great about it. And usually what I see is that it's the partners that are complaining, and the person who's doing this doesn't necessarily notice that that's how they're using their sexuality as this tool to deal with the focus problem. So it's so wonderful that, you're asking these questions and we're talking about this today to just bring it to people's attention. If you have a partner that's complaining about this, maybe it's worth kind of thinking about and looking at what might be going on.
So then is your workbook, is it a simultaneous process of it can help a client and help a clinician? Or is it, okay, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I went the middle road because I really wanted to bring this information to people who needed it. And I think, the way it's set up is you don't have to do every chapter. You can jump around based on what you're most interested in. There's a chapter specifically on hypersexuality and problematic porn use. There's a chapter on sensory issues. There's a chapter on relationships and some of the intimacy pieces. And so I've really tried to, there's even a chapter on safety, actually, sexual victimization and keeping yourself safe. Because we also know that if you have ADHD or you're neurodivergent, you're more likely to have been abused throughout your life or at some point in your life. So really wanting to make this as user-friendly as possible, and you can just take the pieces that matter to you and are relevant.
Beautiful. So they can get more information on your website, again, www.adhdsex.com. Can they get the book on Amazon?
Yep, books on Amazon, absolutely. Let me just think. And I'm also on Instagram, actually, ADHD Sex Workbook on Instagram. And so I try to put reels on there that just give people a bit of information. So we're kind of passing the message along without kind of much, I know there's a word here, but, without a lot of commitment, you can watch a reel or two and get a bit of the information or read a blog and make it pretty easy. Yeah.
Well, what I really appreciate about you as you're describing what can happen to people that have this condition, there's no shame attached. You understand how the brain works. You understand how maladaptive coping skills form. You understand that, this is an issue for the person that has it. And if there's a loved one, it becomes merged and it's an issue for both of them. I just so appreciate the way you put this out there. As we wrap up for today, is there anything else you would really like our listening audience to know? And again, I am talking with Dr. Lyne Piché, who has written ADHD. Well, let's see. How does this go? ADHD and Sex, a workbook for exploring sexuality and increasing intimacy. So what would you leave us with today?
I think the biggest take home here is get to know ADHD, get to know how ADHD applies overall in your life and how it applies in your sex life, and see if that helps bridge the gap between trying and getting to the success that you want. In the ADHD world, we say, don't keep trying harder. If you're trying harder, that's not where we want here. We want you to try different. And if you can try different and find neurodivergent friendly ways to get there, you'll probably be happier, and it probably just be a little easier for you as well. And so I really think it's wonderful that people are here and working so hard at this. Yeah.
I do too. So you can reach her on Instagram at ADHDsexworkbook.com, ADHDsex.workbook. No, workbook.
ADHD Sex Workbook. That's it. Yeah. Instagram is a funny one.
Thank you. And then Facebook would be Dr. Lyne, Lyne, Piché, and that is Piche. You all get this in the show notes. And ADHD and sex. I mean, she's made it her mission. So many people don't even know how to talk about sex. So I love that you're so comfortable with all this. It has really been a pleasure.
It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope that everybody has a fabulous rest of their day.
Well, I do too, as well as when you write a new book, we want to be the first to promote it for you. Okay?
Well, thank you very much. I will definitely keep that in mind. There's some really fun stuff that's going to be, or that is on the website actually, to help you have those hard conversations. So if some of the things today you've heard and you're going, oh, how am I going to do that? Or how am I going to say that? Check out the website. We've got some stuff to make it easy for you.
And remember, she said from the get-go, we were talking about play.
Yes. Yes. This is supposed to be fun.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're swimming upstream and it's too tedious, you're not having fun. No. So I love that. That's inspirational to have couples, have clients look this up and start to play. Thank you so much.
So nice to see everybody. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Talk to you soon.